In the heart of 1994, Formula One stood on the brink of upheaval. Ayrton Senna, a titan of the sport, had abandoned the familiar embrace of McLaren for the treacherous unknown of Williams. The season crackled with tension, the new Williams car proving to be a relentless nemesis. But as the engines roared at Imola that fateful year, no one could have foreseen the tragic turn of events that would forever alter the course of Formula One history. This is the story of Ayrton Senna's final days. 1994 was set to be a blockbuster season in F1 with intense rivalries, new regulations, and a heightened sense of excitement among fans. Ayrton Senna, a three-time world champion, was determined to reclaim the title that had eluded him for the past 2 years. Williams, with their trophy cabinet boasting 7 Constructors' Championships by then, looked like the perfect match for Senna, who'd already had a hat-trick of world titles. Expectations were high, but so were the eyebrows when things started to go a bit pear-shaped. Right from the off, handling the FW16 was like trying to ride a unicycle on a tightrope while juggling chainsaws. Tricky, to put it mildly. It lacked the electronic wizardry Senna was used to. No traction control, no active suspension, just Senna, a steering wheel, and a car with a mind of its own. In his words, it gave him the heebie-jeebies. Not exactly the dream start to a new job, especially when you consider that, at the time, Senna had completed a whopping 8,377 laps in F1 before 1994. And not once did he mention being spooked by his car. Now that's saying something. The season's opening acts were about as smooth as a ride on a cobbled street. Pole positions in Brazil and the Pacific Grand Prix? Check. But finishing the race? That was a whole different story. In stark contrast to the 41 victories he'd amassed previously, our champion was left chasing Schumacher's tail, which in the world of Formula One is rather like chasing a very fast and elusive rabbit. In fact, Schumacher would go on to win 8 of the 16 races that season, making Senna's struggles seem like trying to outswim a shark with one fin tied behind its back. But let's not forget, this was Ayrton Senna we're talking about. The man didn't know the meaning of give up. Here was a guy who danced with danger at 200 miles per hour, and despite the car behaving like a sulky teenager, his spirit remained unshaken. He might have been wearing a helmet, but you didn't need X-ray vision to know he was frowning on the inside. And then there was Estoril, the pre-season testing. Senna's comments about the car were about as comforting as a bungee rope snapping mid-jump. He's saying things like, "I don't feel confident." And everyone's thinking, blimey, if Senna's worried, we all should be. And rightly so. The 1994 season would see 12 different drivers crash out in various races, as if someone had strewn banana peels over the racetrack. With the car's instability and the ban on electric aids, this season was a recipe for trouble, and Senna knew it. Little did he know, the storm was just beginning. As the engines roared to life for the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, no one would have expected that Imola was about to pen one of the most tragic chapters in Formula One history. First up, Rubens Barrichello's crash, a heart-stopping moment for all. Our young Brazilian, full of vim and vigor, hit a curb at a hair-raising 225 kilometers per hour. His Jordan took flight, somersaulting through the air, before coming to rest upside down. Barrichello, knocked out cold and with his tongue threatening to choke him, was saved by the quick actions of medical teams, including Professor Sid Watkins. Senna was one of the first on the scene, as a mentor and friend to Barrichello, and seeing his protege in such a state shook him to the core. Reportedly, he was reduced to tears later that evening, a rare crack in the armor of a man usually as unshakable as a British guard. Then, as if fate hadn't done enough, came the qualifying session on Saturday. Roland Ratzenberger, pushing hard to make his mark, suffered a catastrophic failure when his front wing decided it preferred life as an undercarriage. The result? A terrifying crash at a blistering 314.9 kilometers per hour, leading to fatal injuries. Senna commandeered an official car and rushed to the medical center, where he ultimately discovered that Ratzenberger had succumbed to his injuries. Otherwise a man of steel nerves, he was visibly shaken and decided to withdraw from the rest of the qualifying. Back in his motorhome, Senna's world seemed to crumble. He dodged the press conference and had a bit of a to-do with the stewards over his course car adventure. It was clear that the risk, the danger he'd so often flirted with, was weighing heavily on his mind. He even considered Watkins' advice to hang up his helmet and go fishing, but driven by a racer's fire and passion, he couldn't imagine life away from the asphalt. Despite the weekend's harrowing events, Senna rallied the drivers to reform the Grand Prix Drivers' Association, taking the helm as if to steer the sport away from its perilous path. The original GPDA, disbanded amidst the political kerfuffles between the FOCA and the FIA, had once been the driver's mouthpiece, their shield against the dangers of racing. Senna, in the wake of Imola's tragedies, saw the urgent need to breathe life back into this crucial body. He envisioned a forum where drivers, not just team bosses or sponsors, could have a say in their own safety. A concept as revolutionary as adding seatbelts to a Roman chariot. So, as the sun set on that fateful weekend, the stage was set for a race that no one could have predicted. It was a race against fate, a duel with destiny, and for Ayrton Senna, it was to be his final act, a swan song that would leave the world of Formula One forever changed. On the fateful morning of May 1st, 1994, the Imola circuit woke up under a fog of uneasiness. Before the race, Senna had a heart-to-heart with his once arch-nemesis turned confidant, Alain Prost. But they weren't rehashing old battles. Instead, the topic of conversation was far more serious: safety in their beloved sport. Prost, who had retired just the previous year, couldn't have imagined the gravity this 30-minute conversation would hold that very afternoon. Then came the race. In Senna's cockpit, nestled among the gauges and dials, lay an Austrian flag. He planned to unfurl it in honor of Ratzenberger if he won, as a symbol of unity in the face of danger, and a reminder of the perils they all faced on the track. This race marked Senna's 161st Grand Prix appearance, a journey filled with victories, now juxtaposed with a tribute to a fellow driver's tragic end. As the race commenced, the atmosphere was tense. An early collision caused chaos, bringing out the safety car. Senna, always the strategist, gestured frantically to the safety car driver, fearing a drop in his tyre temperature and pressure. But when the race resumed, it was all systems go. Ever the fighter, the Brazilian charged ahead. But in a cruel twist of fate, Senna's car veered off the Tamburello corner and met the concrete barrier with a sickening thud. The collision was catastrophic, a moment that stopped hearts and held breaths. The racing world froze as Senna lay motionless, his life hanging by a thread thinner than the finish line he had crossed first so many times. The response was immediate, but the gravity of the situation was clear. The marshals, followed by medical experts, including the renowned Sid Watkins, descended upon the scene. Watkins, with the precision of a master surgeon, performed a tracheotomy right there on the track. The world watched, hoping for a miracle, as Senna was airlifted to the hospital. But some battles, even those fought by legends, are insurmountable. At 6:40 p.m, the fateful announcement came that Senna had succumbed to his injuries. And as the sun set on that tragic day, so did the light of one of Formula One's brightest stars. In the aftermath, the world of Formula One found itself at a crossroads, haunted by questions and what-ifs. The Italian Supreme Court's verdict pointed to a failure in the steering column, a chilling reminder that in the pursuit of speed, the price can be unfathomably high. But Senna's death was not just the loss of a champion, it was a turning point in the history of F1. In the wake of the tragic San Marino Grand Prix, the world of Formula One was plunged into mourning. Senna's death was a national calamity for Brazil, prompting the government to declare 3 days of national mourning. His body was flown back, not as cargo, but in the passenger cabin, a final journey befitting a hero, shrouded in the Brazilian flag. The following race in Monaco saw an unprecedented tribute, with the first 2 grid positions left empty, painted with the Brazilian and Austrian flags, a silent homage to Senna and Ratzenberger. The impact of Senna's death rippled far beyond the racetracks. ESPN, broadcasting the San Marino Grand Prix in the US, held a moment of silence during a NASCAR race, a cross-sport honor reflecting the global resonance of the tragedy. Criticism arose against the FIA's 1994 rule changes, prompting calls for safety improvements from figures within and outside the sport, marking the day as the blackest day for Grand Prix racing. In a poignant gesture, the Brazilian World Cup squad dedicated their 1994 victory to Senna, a testament to his enduring influence. The autopsy revealed the grim details of the injuries, underscoring the devastating force of the impact and sparking debates about the immediate and long-term medical responses at the track. Senna's time of death was officially recorded as 2:17 p.m. on May 1st, 1994, under Italian law, highlighting the procedural nuances following such incidents. Amidst the legal battles and technical investigations that followed the tragic events of Imola, Formula One found itself in a rather sobering situation. The sport, often regarded as a playground for daredevils, had to confront some cold, hard truths about the perils of high-speed racing and make some serious safety adjustments. For one, they decided to give the cars a makeover, focusing on reducing speed and increasing driver protection. Cockpits were redesigned, with the sides raised by 20mm and materials reinforced with advanced composites. The plan was to give drivers a fighting chance against the ferocious forces of a high-speed impact, and the result was a protective cocoon that could make even the most hardy tortoise green with envy. And then they introduced the hands device, a gadget so vital it's now as synonymous with racing as the checkered flag. This contraption was like having a personal bodyguard for your neck, dramatically reducing the chances of ending up with an injury that would make you envy the tortoise mentioned earlier. Studies even showed that the hands device reduced the chances of skull fractures in high-speed crashes by a jaw-dropping 80%. Talk about having your necks back. The cars themselves were put on a strict diet and exercise regime. Aerodynamic tweaks were made to slow them down just a tad, ensuring that drivers weren't essentially piloting missiles on wheels. The size of diffusers and front wings was trimmed, and let's not forget, they downsized the engine from 3.5 litres to 3 litres in 1995, resulting in a noticeable drop in horsepower. It was like telling the cars, no more high-octane espresso shots for you. All these changes were a lot like installing speed bumps in a school zone, necessary, even if it meant dialing back on the thrill. But the changes weren't confined to the garage, they were geographical too. Tracks were given the eagle-eye treatment, transforming deadly corners into friendly curves. They expanded the runoff areas, offering cars that went off-track a bit more breathing space, as if saying, feel free to explore the scenic route, chaps. This newfound commitment to track safety had a pretty impressive result, with only one fatality in Formula One from 1994 to 2001. The GPDA, as revived by the late Senna himself, stepped into the scene like a bunch of refined gentlemen at a tea party. They represented the drivers' interests in safety discussions and made sure their voices were heard, unlike the old days where drivers' concerns were often drowned out by the cacophony of commercial and competitive interests. Fun fact, their meetings even included a mandatory cucumber sandwich break as they discussed how to keep the drivers safer on track. But this shift towards prioritizing driver safety has been one of Senna's most enduring legacies, impacting generations of drivers who have followed his tire tracks. Notably, the GPDA's efforts even led to the introduction of mandatory FIA biometric gloves in 2018. These high-tech mitts provided real-time health data to medical personnel in case of an accident, making sure they were clued in on the driver's well-being at all times. So now, in addition to winning races, they can also compete for the title of fastest heartbeat in Formula One. In the years that followed, the sport continued to evolve, with each new regulation and technological advancement being a subtle nod to the Brazilian who once danced with the limits. The legacy of Senna's tragic demise is a sport that no longer flirts quite so recklessly with the Grim Reaper. It's a sport where the drivers are a tad safer, the tracks a tad more forgiving, and the cars a tad less temperamental. And while the thrill of the race remains as irresistible as ever, there's a reassuring sense of security that was born from the darkest day in Formula One's history. The shadow of Imola 94 may still loom large, but it's a shadow that has steered the sport towards a brighter, safer future, one where the only thing in danger of crashing and burning is a poorly executed British accent. As we wrap up this journey, remember to hit that like button and subscribe, because missing out on our future content would be like a Formula One car without its engine, just not the same.